going to tell you something I've kept mostly secret for over 15 years now. I know how it sounds. I know what people think when they hear stories like this. But I'm in my 70s, and honestly, I don't care anymore what anyone thinks. This happened. This is still happening. And before I get too old to remember it clearly, I want to write it down. I live alone in a cabin at the edge of the forest. My nearest neighbor is half a mile away through the trees. The town is 3 miles down the mountain road. I go once a week for supplies, and that's about as much human contact as I need these days. Here's the thing I need you to understand right from the start. A family of Bigfoot has been visiting me for 15 years. I consider them friends. My own children think I've lost my mind, but I know what I've seen. I know what I know. Let me paint you a picture of where I live so you understand the setting. It's a small place, just 1 bedroom with a wood stove that keeps me warm through the winters. I've got a garden patch where I grow vegetables in the summer. It's simple. It's quiet. It's exactly what I wanted when I moved here 20 years ago, right after my husband passed. The cabin sits on about 2 acres of cleared land, with the forest pressing in on 3 sides, thick pine and oak mountain territory. Behind me, the woods go on for miles. It's the kind of place where you can stand on your porch in the morning and not hear a single car, not see a single plane. Just birds and wind and the rustling of whatever animals are moving through the undergrowth. When I first moved up here, I worked with my neighbor Bill to post the property lines. We put up signs every 100 feet or so, private property and no hunting. Some people ignore them, but most respect the boundaries. It's important up here, marking what's yours, making it clear to anyone passing through. I keep chickens in a coop near the house. 12 of them, good layers. They give me eggs and a reason to get up in the morning. The garden keeps me busy during the growing season. I can tomatoes, pickle cucumbers, freeze beans. It's the life I wanted after years of raising kids and dealing with the noise of other people's expectations. My neighbors are sparse up here, and we mostly keep to ourselves. That's mountain living. You wave when you see someone, you help if there's trouble, but you don't just drop by for coffee. Everyone up here came looking for the same thing, to be left alone. It was late summer, 15 years ago now. I'd been living up here for about 5 years at that point, and I thought I knew every sound the forest made. I'd seen bears, deer, foxes, even a mountain lion once from my kitchen window. The wildlife didn't bother me. I respected their space, and they respected mine. This particular evening, I was bringing in laundry from the line. The sun was starting to get low, that golden hour before dusk when everything looks softer. I had my basket half full of sheets when I heard footsteps in the tree line. Heavy footsteps, deliberate, not the shuffling gait of a bear or the light steps of a deer. I froze, thinking it was a bear. We get black bears up here, and you don't mess around with them. I was maybe 30 feet from my back door, trying to decide if I should run for it or stay still when I saw it. The thing that stepped out of the tree line was at least 8 feet tall. It walked upright on 2 legs like a man. But it was covered head to toe in dark brown fur, and it was massive. Shoulders like a linebacker, arm that hung down past its knees. The face was flat, almost human but not quite, with a broad nose and deep-set eyes that caught the evening light. I dropped my laundry basket, sheets spilled out onto the grass. I ran. I made it inside, slammed the door, locked it, and stood there shaking. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely turn the deadbolt. I went to the window and watched. The creature walked along the forest edge, not approaching the cabin, just passing through. It moved with a kind of casual confidence like it owned the place. Its gait was smooth, almost graceful despite its size. After maybe 2 minutes, it disappeared back into the trees. I didn't sleep that night. I kept every light in the cabin on and sat in my kitchen with a baseball bat across my lap, jumping at every sound. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Heat stroke, maybe. Or I'd seen a bear standing up and my mind had filled in the rest. But I knew what I'd seen. I spent the next few days jumpy as a cat, watching the tree line every time I went outside. I'd start to reach for the phone to call someone, then stop. Who would I call? My daughter would insist I come stay with her in town. My son would want me to see a doctor. The sheriff would humor me and do exactly nothing. And honestly, what would I even say? Hi, I saw Bigfoot in my backyard. So I kept it to myself and waited. A few weeks passed. I'd started to relax a little, convinced it had been a one-time thing. Maybe the creature was just passing through the area. Maybe I'd never see it again. Then one early morning, I was checking my garden. The tomatoes were coming in heavy, and I was picking the ripe ones before the birds got to them. I heard rustling near my berry bushes at the forest edge. I looked up and saw her, the same creature, but this time she wasn't alone. She was carrying 2 babies, one on each hip. Well, not babies exactly. They were bigger than human babies, maybe the size of toddlers, but clearly young. They were wiggling and squirming, making it hard for her to hold them both. The mother Bigfoot was trying to pick berries while holding these 2 squirming children, and she looked exhausted. Frustrated, I recognized that look immediately. I'd been a young mother myself years ago, trying to grocery shop with 2 kids hanging off me, both of them wanting different things, both of them cranky. I was crouched behind my chicken coop, watching. The mother didn't seem to notice me. She was too busy trying to grab berries with one hand while the babies wiggled and grabbed at her fur. One of them kept trying to shimmy down, and she'd hoist it back up with a practiced motion. The other one was making small grunting sounds, clearly complaining about something. They were eating from the berry bushes I'd been planning to harvest that week, the wild blackberries that grew at the edge of my property. The mother would grab a handful and stuff them in her mouth, then grab a few more for the babies. She'd try to put berries in their mouths, but they'd squirm and half the berries would fall on the ground. I watched for maybe 10 minutes, and instead of being scared, I felt something else. Sympathy. This was just a mother trying to feed her family. She was tired. The babies were demanding. And she was making do with what she could find. When they finally left, heading back into the deeper woods, I went over to check the bushes. She'd stripped them nearly bare. There were berry stains on the grass where the babies had dropped food, little handprints in the dirt. I spent the next few days thinking about what I'd seen, remembering my own struggles as a young mother, the exhaustion, the constant demands, the way you do anything to feed your kids, even when you are running on empty yourself. 3 days later, early in the morning, I heard the same rustling in the berry bushes. I went to my window and looked out. There they were again, the mother and her 2 little ones. This time, I made a decision. I went to my kitchen and found a large wicker basket, one I use for collecting vegetables from the garden. I filled it with apples from my tree. I added some pears I'd bought in town, carrots from the garden, still dirty from the soil, and some dried fish I'd smoked a few weeks back, thinking I'd save it for winter. I covered the basket with a kitchen cloth and waited by the window, watching. After about 20 minutes, they left, heading back into the forest. I gave it a few minutes to make sure they were really gone. Then I carried the basket out to the spot where they'd been foraging. I set it down in the grass about 10 feet from the tree line and walked back to my cabin. Then I waited. An hour passed. Nothing happened. I went about my morning routine, feeding the chickens, washing dishes, but I kept checking the window. The basket sat there in the morning sun, undisturbed. Late afternoon, maybe 4 o'clock, I heard them coming back. The mother approached the basket cautiously. She set the babies down in the grass, and they immediately started crawling toward the basket, curious. She sniffed it first, long and careful, then looked around. Her eyes swept across my cabin windows. I ducked away, not wanting to spook her. When I peeked back out, she had removed the cloth. She held it in her hands for a moment, examining it, running her fingers over the fabric. The babies were already digging into the apples, making a mess of it. They weren't very coordinated yet, and pieces of apple were flying everywhere. They'd take a bite, drop it, pick up another one. The mother ate the fish first, methodical and quick, then helped the little ones with the food, breaking pieces off for them. She kept glancing at the cloth in her hand as if considering something. They stayed for maybe 20 minutes. When they left, the basket was empty, but it had been neatly placed on its side, and the cloth was folded nearby. Not perfectly, but deliberately. That detail struck me. The mother had taken the time to fold the cloth. She was showing me she understood this was mine, that she was borrowing it, that she would return it. I went out later to retrieve it. They'd taken every bit of food but left my basket and cloth behind. I started leaving baskets every few days after that. Not on a schedule, just when I felt like it. Sometimes I'd leave vegetables, sometimes fruit. I'd bake bread and leave half a loaf, dried meat, whatever I had extra of. They came irregularly, sometimes twice a week. Sometimes I wouldn't see them for 2 weeks, but they always took the food and left the basket. And always the cloth was folded. After a few months of this, I stopped hiding in the cabin when they came. I'd stand in my doorway and watch them eat. The mother noticed me, I'm sure of that. She'd look up, make brief eye contact, then go back to the food. No aggression, just acknowledgement. The babies were growing. I could see it each time they visited. They were getting more coordinated, walking better instead of crawling. They'd toddle around while the mother ate, exploring the grass near the basket, picking up sticks and examining them. The growth seemed fast to me, faster than human children, but then again, I didn't know anything about how Bigfoot aged. Maybe they matured more quickly. Maybe what I was seeing was normal for them. I started moving closer. One visit, I sat in my rocking chair on the porch while they ate, maybe 30 feet away. The mother tensed when she first saw me there, straightening up, watching me carefully. But she didn't flee. She seemed to assess the situation, decided I wasn't a threat, and went back to eating. The next visit, I sat on my porch steps closer. Then the next visit, I moved my chair a little closer to where I left the basket. Over weeks and months, the distance between us shrank. The mother seemed to understand I meant no harm. The babies started looking at me with curiosity instead of fear. One of them, the smaller one, would sometimes stop eating and just stare at me, head tilted like it was trying to figure me out. About 6 months into our arrangement, something different happened. I left a basket as usual, early morning. I was in my kitchen making coffee when I heard them arrive. But when I looked out the window, there were 4 of them. The mother, the 2 babies, and a massive male. He was bigger than the mother by at least a foot, probably 9 feet tall, with broader shoulders and darker fur. He stood at the edge of the clearing while the mother and babies approached the basket. I watched, nervous. This was new. This changed things. The male didn't come closer. He just stood there, watching. Watching his family eat, but also watching my cabin, watching for threats. I realized he was standing guard. The mother kept glancing back at him like she was checking in. The baby seemed oblivious, focused on the food. After about 15 minutes, the mother made a sound, low and guttural. The babies stopped eating immediately and went to her. They all retreated to where the male stood, and then all 4 of them disappeared into the forest. The male came a few more times over the next months, but not often. Usually it was just the mother and babies. I got the sense that he had other territories to patrol, other things to do. But occasionally he'd show up, stand watch while his family ate, then leave. I never felt threatened by him. He never approached the cabin, never made aggressive gestures. He was just doing what fathers do, protecting his family. By the end of the first year, I'd noticed a pattern. They came more often during certain moon phases, the full moon especially. I started marking it on my calendar, noting when they visited. Sure enough, the visits clustered around the full and new moons. I wondered why. Maybe it had to do with their hunting. Maybe they could see better during the full moon and felt safer traveling. Or maybe during the new moon, the darkness gave them cover. I started timing my baskets to the moon phases. I'd make sure to have a basket ready every full moon, whether I'd seen them recently or not. And they came, almost like clockwork. I started noticing small things about them. The mother had a scar on her left shoulder, a long, healed wound that had left a hairless patch. The bigger baby, which I was pretty sure was male, had a lighter patch of fur on his chest, almost tan compared to the rest of his dark brown coat. The smaller one, probably female, had darker fur, almost black, and seemed more curious about everything. They had personalities. The male baby was more cautious, stayed closer to his mother, watched me with wary eyes. The female was adventurous, would wander closer to my cabin, touch my porch railing, peer in my windows. The mother was always vigilant. Even when she seemed relaxed, eating calmly, her eyes were constantly moving. Scanning the tree line, watching the sky, listening, always alert for danger. One afternoon in late fall, the first year, I was sitting on my porch shelling peas. Just a quiet afternoon, enjoying the cool air after a hot summer. I heard them coming and looked up. The mother and the two babies emerged from the forest. By now, the babies were more like toddlers, walking steadily on their own. They came to the spot where I usually left the basket, but there was no basket today. I hadn't expected them. The mother looked around, confused. The babies looked up at her, making questioning sounds. I stood up and went inside. I quickly threw together what I had: some apples, some carrots, a few hard-boiled eggs. I brought it out in a bowl and set it down in the usual spot. The mother looked at me, really looked at me, making direct eye contact for several seconds. Then she nodded. Just a slight dip of her head, but it was unmistakable. She was saying thank you. I nodded back and returned to my porch. I sat down and went back to shelling peas. They ate and I worked, and for 20 minutes we existed in the same space doing our separate tasks. When they finished, the mother picked up the bowl and brought it to my porch steps. She set it down carefully and backed away. I'd never seen her do that before. Usually they just left the basket where it was. She was learning too, understanding the exchange, participating in it. As fall turned to winter, their visits became less frequent. I figured they were foraging elsewhere, maybe preparing for the cold months ahead. I hadn't seen them in nearly 2 months when the first big snow hit. It was a brutal winter that year. The snow came hard and early, and by mid-December we had close to 3 feet on the ground. The temperatures dropped below zero. I kept my wood stove going day and night and mostly stayed inside, venturing out only to feed the chickens and bring in more firewood. I found myself worrying about them. The mother and her babies, I didn't even know why I cared so much. They were wild creatures. They'd survived long before I came along. But still, I worried. Then one afternoon, in the middle of a particularly harsh cold snap, I heard heavy footsteps on my porch, multiple sets of feet, heavier than before. I approached the door cautiously and looked through the window, my breath caught. It was the mother, but the babies weren't babies anymore. They were children now, standing on their own. They'd grown to maybe 4 feet tall, but they all looked thinner. Gaunt, the mother especially looked like she'd lost weight, her fur hanging looser on her frame. They were just standing there, staring at my door, not banging on it, not trying to get in, just standing, waiting. I opened the door slowly. They didn't move. They just looked at me, and I could see it in their eyes. They were hungry, desperate. This wasn't a casual visit. This was need. I held up one finger, trying to make a wait gesture. I don't know if they understood, but they stayed where they were. I went to my kitchen and gathered everything I could spare. Potatoes, everyone I had stored, carrots, all the dried venison I had left, which was meant to last me through winter. A loaf of bread I'd baked that morning. I even threw in a jar of honey. I piled it all in the basket and brought it to the door. I set it on the porch, right there in front of them. The mother bowed her head. It was a clear gesture of thanks, unmistakable. She took the food and gave it to the children first. They ate right there on my porch in the freezing cold, while I stood in my doorway watching. They were so hungry. They ate like they hadn't eaten in days. Maybe they hadn't. When the mother and I made eye contact this time, something passed between us. Understanding, recognition. We were both just trying to survive. Both just trying to make it through the winter. When they finished eating, every last bit of food gone, the mother nodded at me again and they left, disappearing into the snowy darkness. I watched until I couldn't see them anymore, just dark shapes moving through the white landscape. My daughter came to visit the next week, bringing groceries because the roads were bad and she worried I couldn't get to town. She saw the large footprints in the snow around my cabin, 3 sets of them, too big to be human, leading from the tree line to my porch and back again. She demanded to know what was going on. I'd never been good at lying to my children, so I told her the truth. She was horrified. These were wild animals, she said, dangerous. I was in danger. What if they broke in? What if they attacked me? What if I needed help and couldn't call anyone because some creature had hurt me? I tried to explain, tried to tell her they'd been coming for over a year now, that they'd never shown any aggression, that we had an understanding. But she wouldn't hear it. The next time she visited, she brought my grandson with her. They both insisted I needed to leave. Come stay in town. This wasn't safe. I was getting older. I shouldn't be living alone out here anyway, and definitely not with wild animals coming around. I refused. My daughter was angry. She even threatened to have me declared incompetent, to force me to move. She said I couldn't call the police about Bigfoot without everyone thinking I was senile. I stood firm. These were my friends, I told her. They needed me. And maybe I needed them too. She left angry. My grandson looked worried. But I didn't care. I knew what I knew, and I knew I was doing the right thing. The snow melted, spring came slowly, the way it does in the mountains. The ice thawed. The forest started to wake up. I hadn't seen the Bigfoot family since that winter night on my porch, and I was worried. I started leaving baskets again, just in case. Sometimes I'd wake up and find the basket gone, taken during the night, but I never saw them take it. Then one morning in early April, I was in my garden planting seeds, peas and lettuce, the things that can handle the cool spring soil. I heard familiar footsteps and looked up. All 3 of them stood at the forest edge. The children were even bigger now, maybe 5 feet tall, more independent looking. They looked healthier than they had in winter, like they had been eating well. Their fur was thicker, shinier. I smiled. I actually waved, feeling a little foolish. The mother raised one hand. It was almost like she was waving back. I went inside and prepared a basket. This time, instead of leaving it and retreating, I brought it directly to them at the forest edge. I set it down about 10 feet from where they stood and stepped back. They approached and began eating. The children were playful now, wrestling a bit, shoving each other while they grabbed food, play fighting over who got which apple. The mother seemed more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. I sat down in the grass and watched them. Just sat there, maybe 15 feet away, while they ate and the children played. We stayed like that for almost an hour. Over the next year, their visits became more regular. I noticed they came more often in the early morning or at dusk. never during the heat of midday. I started timing the baskets to when I expected them. Sometimes I'd sit near the basket while they ate. The mother would sit too, maybe 10 feet from me, while the children ate and played. We didn't talk, obviously, but there was a comfortable silence between us, a kind of peaceful coexistence. I learned to read their body language. I could tell when the mother was relaxed versus when something had made her alert. When she was alert, her whole body would stiffen, her head would turn sharply toward whatever sound or movement had caught her attention. When she was relaxed, her shoulders would drop, her movements would be slower, more casual. The children were losing their fear of me completely. The female especially would come close, sometimes within 5 feet, examining me with obvious curiosity. She'd look at my clothes, my hands, my face, like she was trying to understand what I was. One day, the smaller child dropped an apple, and it rolled toward me. I picked it up and held it out. The child hesitated, looking at its mother. The mother didn't react, just kept eating, so the child approached me and took the apple from my hand. The touch was brief, just fingers brushing against my palm, but my heart swelled. That level of trust felt like a gift. I started paying attention to the sounds they made. They didn't talk, not like humans, but they communicated. Low grunts, soft hoots, huffing sounds. Each seemed to mean something different. A sharp huff from the mother would make the children freeze. A low hoot would make them come to her. A gentle grunt seemed to be reassurance. I tried making sounds back, nothing elaborate, just soft noises to let them know I was there, that I was friendly. Sometimes the mother would respond with a quiet hoot, like acknowledgement. I started keeping a journal, not for science or anything official, just for myself. I wanted to remember these moments. I recorded when they visited, what they ate, behaviors I noticed, little things that seemed important, like how the male child always let his sister eat first, or how the mother would groom the children after they ate, picking things out of their fur, or how they'd sometimes just sit together at the forest edge, not eating, not moving, just being together as a family. I realized I cared deeply about their well-being. I started saving the best produce from my garden for them. The biggest tomatoes, the sweetest corn. I planted extra berry bushes along the forest edge, the kind I'd seen them eating from. I planned my garden partly around what they seemed to like. I noticed they never took my chickens, even though they could easily get into the coop. They respected boundaries. They never entered my garden without being invited closer. They seemed to understand what was mine and what was okay to take. One time I found the gate to my chicken coop open and I panicked, thinking something had gotten in. But all the chickens were fine. The gate had just blown open in the wind, but there were large footprints near the coop and the gate had been closed again, not latched but pushed shut. One of them had seen the open gate and closed it for me. One afternoon, I was sitting on my porch snapping green beans. I had a big bowl of them from the garden, and I was getting them ready to can. The work was meditative, rhythmic. The 2 young Bigfoot appeared at the forest edge. Without their mother this time, I gestured for them to come closer. They approached cautiously, looking back toward the forest like they were checking if it was okay. I showed them how to snap the beans. Took one, broke off the ends, snapped it in half. I handed them each a bean and demonstrated again. They watched me carefully, then mimicked the motion. The female got it right away. The male struggled at first, breaking the bean into too many pieces. I gave them each a bowl and they sat on my porch steps and helped me snap beans. They were clumsy at first, breaking the beans wrong, dropping pieces, getting frustrated. But they learned. The female was making pleased little sounds when she got it right. The male was more serious, concentrating hard on getting each one perfect. It took 3 times longer than if I'd done it myself, but I didn't care. I enjoyed the company, enjoyed teaching them something. When we were done, I let them eat some of the raw beans. They seemed to like them, crunching them happily. I cooked the rest and brought out 3 bowls. We ate together on the porch, me in my chair, them on the steps. The mother appeared at the tree line while we were eating. She watched but didn't interrupt, didn't seem worried or upset, just watched her children eating with me, sharing a meal. When the youngsters finished, they brought the bowls back to me carefully, one at a time. Then all 3 returned to the forest together. It was early fall, about 3 years in, when something happened that changed everything again. I woke in the middle of the night to a sound I'd never heard before, a low, mournful wailing coming from the forest. It was desperate, frightened. It raised the hair on the back of my neck. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the back door, opening it carefully. The wailing continued, and I recognized it now. It was the mother Bigfoot. I called out, using the low hooting sound I'd learned. The wailing stopped for a moment, then resumed, more urgent. I pulled on my boots and coat and ventured out into the darkness, flashlight beam cutting through the trees. Every instinct told me this was foolish, but something was wrong. Badly wrong. I found them about 50 yards into the forest. The mother was on the ground, one leg twisted at an unnatural angle beneath her. The young male stood over her, making anxious grunting sounds. The female was nowhere to be seen. When the mother saw me, she made a sound. Not threatening, pleading. I knelt down, keeping my distance but close enough to see. Her leg was clearly broken, a bad break, and there was a gash on her shoulder that looked like she'd fallen against something sharp. Blood matted the fur around the wound. I ran back to the cabin and grabbed my first aid kit, the big one I kept for emergencies. I also grabbed clean towels, water, and a bottle of whiskey for disinfectant. When I returned, she hadn't moved. The young male backed away when he saw me coming, but the mother made a sound and he stayed close, watching. I worked as quickly as I could. I cleaned the shoulder wound first, pouring whiskey over it. She flinched but didn't pull away. I pressed a towel against it until the bleeding slowed, then wrapped it as best I could. The leg was beyond my skills. I knew she needed more help than I could give. But I also knew I couldn't call anyone. Who would come? Who would help a Bigfoot? I stayed with her until dawn, keeping pressure on the wound, talking to her in soft tones. The young male stayed too, anxious but trusting me to help his mother. As the sun rose, the young female appeared, carrying an armful of plants. She brought them to her mother, and I realized they were medicinal plants. Leaves I recognized as having anti-inflammatory properties. The mother ate them slowly, and over the next hour she seemed to stabilize. Her breathing became less labored. She tried to stand but couldn't put weight on the leg. I made a decision. I went back to the cabin and returned with a thick branch I used for a walking stick and some rope. I fashioned a crude splint, remembering what I'd learned years ago when my son broke his arm. It wasn't perfect, but it would help. The mother let me work, watching me with those deep-set eyes. When I was done, she tried standing again. With the splint, she could put some weight on the leg, though she still limped badly. She touched my face with one huge hand, gentle, deliberate. Her palm was warm and rough, and she held it there for several seconds before pulling away. For the next 3 weeks, I visited them in the forest twice a day, bringing food and checking the wound. The young ones helped their mother move to a sheltered spot under an overhang of rock where she could rest protected from the elements. I brought blankets from my cabin, which they arranged around her. Slowly, she healed. The wound closed. The leg began to bear weight. And when she could finally walk again, limping but mobile, she came to my cabin one last time before disappearing into the deep forest. She left a gift on my porch, a beautiful piece of quartz crystal, smooth and clear, the size of my fist. I still have it. After the injury, the gifts became more frequent. It started with that quartz crystal, but then other things appeared. A single pine cone on my porch step, I thought maybe it had blown there at first. Then another appeared the next day and another. Then one morning I found an arrangement of pine cones on my porch, deliberately placed in a pattern, not random, intentional. Another day I found smooth river stones stacked by my door, 5 of them balanced carefully on top of each other. Wildflowers appeared in a bunch, clearly picked and placed near my chair. They were gifts. I recognized them for what they were. I started leaving special things for them too, not just food, pretty things. A piece of colored glass I found near the creek. Some bells that made soft sounds. A mirror, curious to see what they'd do with it. The mirror disappeared the first night. I like to think they found it fascinating. I bought honey in town and left a whole jar, fresh baked pies, the first strawberries of the season. 4 years into our relationship, I felt like I understood them better than I understood most humans. I knew when they were coming by the way the forest sounds changed. Birds would go quiet first, maybe 5 minutes before they appeared. The usual rustling and chittering would stop. Then I'd hear their footsteps. I could tell their moods by their posture and movements. The mother was aging too, moving a bit slower, getting gray around her muzzle and hands. I saw it happening gradually, the way you notice aging in old friends. The young ones were nearly full grown now. The male was almost as tall as his mother. The female was slightly smaller but more confident. I wondered what would happen when they matured completely. Would they leave? Start their own families? The thought made me sad. One day in late summer, I heard gunshots in the forest. Multiple shots, fairly close. Hunters. Despite the no hunting signs I posted years ago with Bill's help, I was worried immediately. I went to the forest edge and called out. Not words, just sounds. The kinds of sounds I'd heard the Bigfoot make. Low hoots, urgent and repeated. I heard crashing through the brush, fast, panicked movement. The young female appeared, clearly frightened. Her eyes were wide and she was breathing hard. I gestured frantically toward my cabin. She hesitated, looking back at the forest. More gunshots, closer now. She ran to the porch, crouched there, making herself small behind the railing. I positioned myself between the porch and the forest, planted my feet and waited. 2 hunters emerged from the trees, carrying rifles. They saw me. They didn't see the Bigfoot hiding behind my cabin, pressed flat against the wall. I told them this was private property and they needed to leave immediately. They apologized, said they were tracking a deer, claimed they didn't see the no hunting signs, though I knew there were at least 3 between here and where they'd been shooting. I stood firm, didn't move, didn't look away, told them to leave now and don't come back. Told them I had their faces memorized and would report them to the sheriff if I saw them again. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. They left, disappearing back into the trees, grumbling about crazy old ladies. When they were gone, I turned to the porch. The young female was trembling, her whole body shaking, breathing fast and shallow. I sat down beside her on the porch. I didn't touch her, but I stayed close, offering presence, offering safety. We sat until the shaking stopped, maybe 20 minutes. She slowly calmed down, her breathing returning to normal. The mother and the young male appeared at the forest edge. The mother looked frantic, her eyes scanning everywhere. She saw her daughter on my porch and made a sound, a low, urgent call. The young female stood up and went to her mother. The mother looked her over carefully, checking for injuries. Then the mother approached me. She placed one massive hand on my shoulder. Brief contact, heavy and warm. Then she removed it and they left together, moving quickly into the deeper forest. I understood it was gratitude. Thank you for protecting my child. The summer of the 10th year brought the worst storm I'd seen in decades. The Weather Service had been warning about it for days, a massive system moving up from the south. I'd prepared as best I could, securing anything that might blow away, stocking up on supplies, making sure I had plenty of firewood and lamp oil in case the power went out. The storm hit on a Tuesday afternoon. The wind came first, bending the trees almost horizontal. Then the rain, sheets of it, so thick I couldn't see 20 feet from my window. Thunder cracked so loud it shook the cabin walls. The power went out within the first hour. I lit my oil lamps and sat by the wood stove, listening to the storm rage outside. This was mountain weather. It would pass, but it didn't pass. It went on for hours, getting worse instead of better. By evening, I started to worry about the old oak tree near the cabin, the one with the dead branch I'd been meaning to have removed. In this wind, it could come down. Around 9 o'clock, I heard a different sound over the storm. A crack, then a groan, then a massive crash that shook the whole cabin. Something had hit the roof. I grabbed my flashlight and went to investigate, even though I knew I shouldn't go outside. In my bedroom, rain was pouring in through a hole in the ceiling. The dead branch, or maybe even part of the tree, had punched through. I tried to cover the hole with a tarp, but I couldn't reach it. Water was pouring in, soaking the bed, flooding the floor. I was in my 70s and couldn't climb up there. I was going to lose my bedroom, maybe worse if the damage spread. I heard heavy footsteps on the porch over the sound of the storm, then banging on the door, urgent, insistent. I opened it to find all three of them standing there, soaked through, the wind whipping their fur. The mother made an urgent sound and gestured toward the roof. They'd heard the crash. They'd come to help. I led them to the bedroom, showed them the hole. The male and female youngsters immediately went outside, and I heard them climbing. The mother stayed with me, making calming sounds while we listened to her children work above us in the storm. They were up there for maybe 30 minutes. I could hear dragging sounds, thumping, the scrape of branches being moved. When they finally came down, soaked and breathing hard, the rain had stopped pouring through my ceiling. They'd removed the branch and covered the hole with something. Smaller branches, maybe, or bark. It wasn't perfect, but it was holding. The mother checked the room one more time, nodded to herself, then led her children to the door. Before they left, she turned back and touched my shoulder again. That gesture I'd come to recognize as affection. Then they disappeared into the storm. In the morning, I saw what they'd done. They'd removed the massive branch that had fallen and dragged it 50 feet away from the cabin. They'd covered my roof with a layer of pine boughs and bark, carefully arranged and weighted down with rocks. It had held through the rest of the storm. It took me 3 days to get someone from town to come fix the roof properly. The repairman asked who'd done the temporary fix. I told him I'd managed it myself. He looked at me skeptically, saw the size of the branch that had been moved, then looked at me again but said nothing. I'm slowing down now, more than I like to admit. I'm in my mid-70s. The garden is harder to maintain. Chopping wood is almost impossible. My knees hurt when I climb the porch steps. My hands are arthritic, making the simple tasks I used to do without thinking take twice as long. One morning, I woke up to find my woodshed filled with split logs, not just a few. The whole thing was stocked, enough to last me through winter. A fresh stack of firewood on my porch, too. I hadn't heard anything during the night. But then again, I'm a heavy sleeper these days, especially since I started taking the medication for my blood pressure. And the walls of my cabin are thick, the woodshed is around back. If they'd worked carefully, slowly, it's possible I could have slept through it. Or maybe they did it during the day while I was in town. I'll never know for sure. I started finding my garden weeded, rows that I'd been meaning to get to, cleaned of weeds, the soil around my plants loosened. Bags of chicken feed moved from my truck to my porch. Heavy things I couldn't lift anymore, relocated to where I needed them. They were taking care of me now. The relationship had come full circle. I'd fed them when they were hungry. Now they were helping me when I was weak. My daughter visited in the fall of that year and saw the stacked firewood. She knew I hadn't done it. There was no way I could have. She'd been nagging me for months to hire someone to split wood, knowing I couldn't do it myself anymore. She finally asked, "They're real, aren't they?" I nodded. She sat down at my kitchen table and asked me to tell her everything. So I did. I told her the whole story from that first terrifying evening 15 years ago to now. The fear, the curiosity, the slow building of trust, the winters we'd survived together, the gifts exchanged, the way they helped me now, the night they fixed my roof in the storm, everything. She was quiet for a long time when I finished. She got up and poured herself coffee, stared out my kitchen window at the forest. Finally, she said, "I still think you're crazy, but maybe it's a good kind of crazy." Then she added, "I want to see them." So we waited. We sat on the porch together that afternoon, and my daughter was quiet, patient, in a way I'd never seen from her before. Evening came, and as dusk settled in, I made my soft hooting sound toward the forest. Nothing happened at first. Then, as the light faded, 3 shapes emerged from the tree line. My daughter gasped but stayed seated. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair, but she didn't move, didn't run, just watched. The mother approached slowly, studying my daughter. She stopped about 20 feet away, and we made eye contact. I nodded to her, trying to communicate that it was okay, that this was my daughter, that she was safe. The mother seemed to understand. She came closer to the edge of the porch and looked at my daughter directly. My daughter stared back, tears running down her face. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Mom, oh my God." The mother nodded once, then retreated to her children. They didn't stay long, just long enough for my daughter to see them clearly, to understand. Then they disappeared back into the forest. My daughter sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I tried to make you leave." She agreed to stop pressuring me to move to town. She made me promise to call if I ever felt unsafe, but she acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, I knew what I was doing. That maybe I was safer here than anywhere else. Late fall, 15 years since I first saw them. I was on my porch at dusk, just sitting, watching the light fade. The air was cool and still, everything quiet. All 3 of them emerged from the forest together. They walked directly to my porch. No basket waiting, no food prepared, just a visit. They sat with me, the 2 young ones on the steps, the mother on the ground nearby, her back against my porch, me in my chair. We watched the sunset together, the sky turning orange, then pink, then purple. None of us eating, none of us doing anything except being present, existing together in that moment. I realized this is what it had always been about. Not the feeding, not the exchange of help, not even the protection or the gifts, just connection, companionship. 2 different species finding common ground, understanding across a divide that shouldn't exist. I think about why they keep coming back. Maybe they're as lonely as I am. The mother saw in me another aging female trying to survive. The young ones never learned to fear me because their mother showed them I was safe. I don't need to know the exact reason. It's enough that they come, that they trust me, that in this small corner of the world, human and Bigfoot found a way to coexist peacefully. I wonder sometimes if there are others like them out there, other families in other mountains. And I wonder if somewhere there's another old person like me feeding them, building trust. I hope so. I hope we're not the only ones. I'm telling this story now because I'm getting older. I want someone to know what happened here, not for proof or fame, just to record that this happened. That friendship can exist in unexpected forms, that sometimes the wild things aren't so wild, and the civilized world isn't as knowing as it thinks. I'll keep leaving baskets as long as I'm able, and I suspect they'll keep coming as long as I'm here. Maybe longer. It's a relationship built on respect, routine, and something that might be love, or at least its closest equivalent between species. I don't know what will happen when I'm gone. I hope they'll be okay. I know they probably will be. They survived long before I came along. But I like to think I made their lives a little easier, and they certainly made mine richer. They gave me purpose in my solitude. They reminded me that connection doesn't require words, that kindness crosses all boundaries. My daughter has promised to keep leaving food for them after I'm gone. She's even started bringing her own children up here, teaching them to be still and quiet, to respect the forest. My grandchildren have seen them now from a distance. They sit wide-eyed on the porch, barely breathing, watching these magnificent creatures eat from baskets prepared with care. Maybe this will continue. Maybe this relationship I started will outlive me, passed down through generations on both sides. A human family and a Bigfoot family bound together by an old woman's simple decision to fill a basket with food 15 years ago. That's all that matters in the end. For more interesting stories, check this out.